of opening week at Saratoga. I was lucky enough to be up there all week, headed up on Wednesday. Fiance came up for a couple of days, so we had some fun as well on Monday and Tuesday and just got back home. There's a lot to take away from the racing side and from just the atmosphere and the vibe. We did this once before when I was at the Belmont. John, what would you like to know?
Joe, greater minds than mine would like to know from a man on the street. What was the vibe at Saratoga? What was the overall feeling about the races that were being carted? And also, you got to walk me through this whole cashless, vendor situation, because I don't know from that.
Yeah, oh man. So first of all, one thing I definitely noticed, it was very, very empty comparatively to an opening week at Saratoga. Even like, especially Sunday. Sunday was like a ghost town. And I love that because I'm spiritually a very old man and I do not like crowds. And it was uncomfortably crowded, as I mentioned, at the Belmont. But I think that had something to do with it. I think the fact that the Belmont was run in June so close to the start of the Saratoga meet that a lot of people came up for the Belmont, and then we're like, I don't need to go back to Saratoga quite so soon. So I think that affected the crowds that we had on opening week, but it was perfect for me, and that's what the audience wants to know about. How did it affect Joe Bianca? Yes, exactly. But it didn't seem to affect Handle. Like Handle was pretty strong opening week. We lost the first day of turf races, but then we were able to be on the turf the rest of the week. It was hot. It was a little bit uncomfortable, and thankfully it's cooled off a little as soon as I left town. It cools off. We also saw that there were some major storms on the backstretch, so hope everybody is safe and sound. Hope all the horses are okay, and then we can move forward for the rest of the meet. The cashless thing, like it really is the way of the world now. Like you just if I get that people are like, oh, racetrack is one of the only places left where cash is king. It's just not that way. Like go to any sporting event, it's all debit cards or Apple Pay or whatever. And it's just faster. It's just faster to get the lines moving quicker. One tap, move to the side. Here's your food. Here's your program, whatever it is. It's necessary for the future. You can still bet with cash, of course. That currency is always accepted at the windows. But yeah, I didn't think it was a big deal or a big sticking point, and people will get used to it. But John, I want to ask you about the racing opening week at Saratoga. I have my feelings and what stood out to me. But just watching it from afar, what was your takeaway from opening week?
Well, again, Joe, I think like anything else, there's going to be smaller fields everywhere, and that's just part and parcel of racing here on the East Coast, especially, or on the coast, I guess I should say, especially. California's a different story because they just don't have as many, as large of a horse population. But here, there are so many options, especially in the spring and summertime, that if you don't like a race that's potentially carded or in the condition book at Saratoga, you have 6 other racetracks within a 200-mile radius that you can run in. So they are going to get thinned out. And now purses and other racetracks are starting to increase to the point where, Saratoga is still really good, but for maybe a little bit less money, you have a better chance to win at one of the other racetracks. Joe, the thing that's been driving me nuts, and you and I talk about this off air a lot, is the stakes schedule. With these major racetracks, whether it's Saratoga or Monmouth or Delaware, they're just not coordinating. And a perfect example is there was a 3-year-old colt and gelding stake race going 5.5 furlongs on the turf. One of them was the quick call at Saratoga that had 7 horses carded in it. And one on the same day, one of them was the My Frenchman, also going 5.5 furlongs on the turf that had 5 horses. The thing that really surprised me was there was only one horse that was cross-entered. And interestingly enough, that's the horse that won one of the stake races. So the tip of the cap to the racing manager at Christophe Clement's, barn for recognizing those 2 races were the same place or the same day. I mean, they're 2 different places. But Apollo 10 in this case ran in an easier division of which was the My Frenchman, but it just doesn't make any sense to me. And the same thing's coming up again with a bigger race, and that's the Haskell versus the Jim Dandy being 7 days apart and just watering down again the fields of both of those racetracks. So nothing new, but you would like to think that the bigger the race is, graded stake races, grade 3, grade 2, grade 1 in this case with the Haskell, that they'd be able to figure it out on the calendar where it would be more interesting. And Joe, this is from a guy who ran in a 4-horse field Dwyer. that was just,
Right.
the week earlier, which was a grade 3 for $200,000 in New York. So it's crazy that we have all of these, especially 3-year-old races, that are just stacked one on top of the other, when the population of the horses per year, per crop, is reducing. We haven't been able to reduce these stake races. And I understand why, because the breeders really want to have black type in the family. And not a lot of people check to see if a horse finished third in the stake, was it third or was it next to last? And I still got black type. People aren't necessarily looking at that part. But there's going to be a point in time, Joe, where some of these ambulances are going to get black type because there just aren't enough horses in the races.
And they motor too. I don't know, like this,
they always finish last though. It's got to be bad jockeying.
But this always happens to me at Aqueduct. They scare the shit out of me. I'm like, I watch the race down at the rail, and then the ambulance always drives past them. Like, oh shit, I forgot. I'm supposed to be following the horses. Like that's how fast they drive.
Yeah.
Like a freaking getaway car in a bank robbery. Like I don't know what that's about. But no, that's a good line. And yeah, I honestly am looking forward to the Graded Stakes Committee's rulings next year, because we talked about it a lot, about how a lot of the New York races were downgraded and none were in Kentucky. You
love that stat. You love that stat.
Really sticks in my craw. But that was so I hope that got enough attention.
Right.
They'll start to downgrade some Kentucky races as well. But they're really there are just so many races that don't need to be races, or at least don't need to be grade 1, grade 2s. And look no further than this weekend's Coaching Club American Oaks. I get it. This is an historic race. It's an important race in terms of, horses that have gone on to be in the Hall of Fame, gone on to be champions. It's had some great winners. Even recently, Monomoy Girl, Songbird come to mind. But look at the field size. We've got 5 horses in this Saturday's renewal. Torpedo Ana obviously is the leader in the division, so it does have some star power. 2023, 5 horses. 2022, 5 horses. 2021, 4 horses. 2020, 5 horses. 2019, 5 horses. 2018, 5 horses. 2017, 7 horses. So you had to go all the way back 7 years to find a Coaching Club American Oaks that had more than 5 horses in it. And eventually, this is going to come to a head, and people are going to stop betting these cards the way that they normally do, and it's going to affect the industry. It hasn't happened yet, but I do think we're going to reach an inflection point, because I have zero interest in betting that race. Just like I had no interest in betting the Kelso on Saturday. And we were in the race with Northern Invader. It was 4 horses. It was just an unbettable field. And there's just, like you say, there's so much overlap. And it really is the selfishness of the breeders. I think the only reason that nothing more drastic has been done to reduce the graded stakes and the stakes calendar, because like you say, there's no context on the pedigree page. If you have black type, and very few people are going to dig and see that you were third in a 4-horse field. Basically, by default, you got graded stakes or stakes black type, and it needs to be devalued because of the short fields and because of the abysmally, lack of betting interest that we have in these races. I will bang on this drum every single week with you, John, if that's what it takes. And I encourage other industry participants who aren't breeders to do the same thing, because how could you possibly put a field? And it was the same thing like Stars and Stripes Day at Aqueduct right before Saratoga. And I like that card. I like the advent of the Belmont Derby and the Belmont Oaks, but it was just 1, 4, and 5 horse field after another. Can we please get together and either get rid of some of these races or shuffle them around differently on the calendar? Because God knows there are too many options for trainers who don't want to run their horses often enough. It just is. It's a depressing thing. And I don't want to go too negative, because there was a lot of great racing at Saratoga this past week and this coming weekend. But John, it's just it really is it's a major downer from a betting standpoint, and even from a fan standpoint, that, oh God, I can't wait to see Torpedo Ana at 2 to 5 against 4 tomato cans in this Coaching Club American Oaks. Why do we need that race?
And Joe, I think what's going to happen, what I'm hoping is going to happen, is that with the installation of these all-weather racetracks at the various, that are, whether it's Belmont or Gulfstream that was just implemented, et cetera, then I'm hoping that they will adopt some of these stake races and put them onto the Tapeta, because right now that is an area that is underserved. there are not very many stake races on the Tapeta outside of the year-round Tapeta racing, like or the full-time Tapeta racing, like at Turfway or at Presque Isle, or of course at Woodbine. But otherwise, you look at Gulfstream's stakes calendar, and I don't think there is a stake race on the Tapeta, at least after the championship meet. There might not even be one for I don't know if there was, I don't remember if there's one for the championship meet or not, but I know after the championship meet, if there's one, I might be exaggerating. So maybe you take some of these stake races, not the coaching club, obviously, but you take some of these other stake races that don't have quite the vast history, but are in the same division, and you transfer the name over to over to the new surface, because then at least you're giving horses that need to run on that or excel on that surface an opportunity to continue to earn black type. And then it's valuable, because then you're getting 7, 8, 9 horses in those races. And it's not like de facto black type, because like I said, you ran third in a 4-horse field.
Yeah, no, totally. And I think that solves a problem that a lot of people have with synthetic racing, is that especially at Gulfstream, it's a lot of cheap horses. And it's just, they do have bigger fields, but it's a lot of cheap horses beating each other, taking turns beating each other over and over again. So if you do beef up the synthetic stakes calendar, I do think you get better horses, you get fuller fields, you have a more interesting betting product. And I mean, that's what drives the game, people. That's what drives the game. Bettors and owners are what drives the game. And to act like, that's not important and we can just keep, stamping black type on these horses in these 4 and 5 horse fields and just do that forever, I think is a little short-sighted. One race that did have a full field that I noticed over the weekend was a Diana. That was a really nice race. 10 horses, only 5 Chads. Chad only had 50% of the field this time, so we're making progress, and somebody else challenging him in that division. I don't think that division is stellar. I think that's another one where they're kind of taking turns beating each other. But White Beam goes wire to wire. It was good to see NYRA come back and run a big race. She had come on last year and ran great in the Breeders' Cup, and she ran against the grain of the race in the Diana too,
right?
Because that was a race that was pretty much a merry-go-round. She was the only one who made up any ground. And then the other thing I wanted to mention from opening week is the 2-year-old racing. It's obviously so exciting to have the babies come out at Saratoga and Del Mar. West Point had a really, really nice first-time starter, Moment's Notice, who ran third on Saturday. That was great to see. Son of More Than Ready. Somehow he was 16-1, even with the West Point money. So that probably won't happen next time out. But the winner of that race, I want to talk about Tough Catch, who went wire to wire. And he was one of 2 big winners for complexity on the day, because Moplex also won the Sanford in a blowout performance after Rapoli had to scratch Menti. And John, Complexity has been the standout stallion, the first crop stallion so far this year. Vacoma's had a bunch of winners too, but Complexity. And I think I always thought he was going to be a nice stallion because he had that like 7 furlong mile type speed. I think those produce a lot of really nice horses. John, have you seen anything from the Complexities that stands out or that makes you like more interested to potentially buy one?
Well, when you talk about first-year stallions, I take it a little bit with a grain of salt, Joe, because doing something early on doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to be a prolific stallion. That being said, I agree with your point about Complexity and having the quote unquote good resume of distance. It used to be where 7/8, 8 furlong miler type horses were, usually the standard bearer when it came to stallions. And in this case with Complexity, you can say the same thing. We had Mensa early on, who I think was Complexity's first winner, actually at the time. And then we sold him on the Phasic digital sale, and he is going to run. There was a card that got canceled at Woodbine due to heat. And they're bringing that race back I believe, for this weekend. So Mensa will be running for Resolute Racing with Mark Cassie, continue to train. So we had a Complexity. He was obviously very precocious, and we really liked him. And he won first time out. But yeah, the babies are what you come to see at in these non-stake races, at least at Saratoga, because they're the hope, they're the future. Joe, you touched upon White Beam winning the Diana, the homebred of Juddmonte's, winning the grade 1. When I was away, I was thinking about the fact that, again, breeders, sometimes we as breeders, I'll include myself in there, get overjoyed about certain stallions in the early beginning, whether it's Vekoma and Complexity this year, or Omaha Beach, in previous years, where you get super excited about stuff, and then you have to really wait and see how the progeny continue to run. How about a horse like Caravaggio, where we bought a few Caravaggios and they didn't turn out very well at all. The horse stood originally in Europe, son of Scat Daddy. Coolmore brought him over here. And then had a couple of okay crops, nothing really big, and then they subsequently sold him. But now, within a week, he had White Beam, who won the Grade 1 Diana, and Porter Fortuna, who won the Group 1 Falmouth over in Europe, with Donica O'Brien as trainer and Medallion Racing as the primary owner of that horse. So now he's got not one, he being Caravaggio, has got not one but two Grade 1, Group 1 horses that are raising his awareness to the rest of the industry. And you wonder, you say, in hindsight, should the farms have a little bit more patience, especially with the son of Scat Daddy, who is the sire of sires now. He produced No Nay Never and Justify and Mendelssohn and Sioux Nation and Flame Away. I mean, there's again, in hindsight, you look back and say maybe I should have given him more time, but the Caravaggios didn't. I mean, they look like him. He's not a very big horse, and here in the States, people don't like that on the commercial side. They want a big 16 plus handed horse. They don't want a 15-3 like Papa was.
Yeah, he was gorgeous,
gorgeous, and a stellar racehorse.
Yeah, so I'm not surprised to see another son of Scat Daddy kind of really finding his own and finding his stride with his third or fourth crop now.
Right.
So yeah, that was good to see. The other thing I wanted to mention, last thing for me, was about Saratoga. And if you weren't paying attention for whatever reason for opening week, maybe you were away. The speed is king on a dirt court, on a dirt track, and this was the case at the Belmont. Speed was just it was money, and I think that's one of the things that kind of carried Dornoch to the win in the Travers. Not that he didn't run a good race, but it just is so hard to close on that dirt track, and I hope that changes throughout the meet, because I've always thought of Saratoga as a very fair surface. Obviously, there are certain days where certain paths or certain styles work best, but I've always thought of Saratoga as very, very fair, not like Monmouth, not like the old Keeneland highways. This was a place where it really was an even, level playing field and proving grounds for some of the best horses. So I hope that changes. We'll see. We're recording this Wednesday, early afternoon, so they're going to kick off the second week in just a little bit. But that's definitely something to look for if you're starting to bet, if you're like warming to the task, as they say, starting to bet Saratoga this meet. And also something to look for if you do find horses who maybe, closed a little bit and ran third or fourth, maybe put a star around them or a circle around them and look for them later in the meet if the track does shift to become more fair, because right now it's every race is 1, 2, 3 around the track pretty much.